Business, a podcast about business, marketing, growth strategy, staff, clients, babies, and marriage. I'm Christina. This is Peter. We're founders and leaders of CIPR Communications, and we're still talking PR.
We're talking about PR, and today's topic is going to be public relations and multi-channel marketing. And we may have touched on this a little bit before, but we're going to kind of go a little bit deep on it. I'm sort of lately been obsessed with this idea of marketing communications, this concept that we've been digging into more at CIPR Communications. And really, if you look at online on Google, what is marketing communications? It's really this concept of multi-channel marketing or multi-channel marketing and communications. And so, and that's really kind of the direction that everything seems to be going these days. No longer can you pick a channel and go deep on that one channel. I think today, in today's environment, you need to pick a few channels that are going to work for you, and, probably go really deep on one, and then sort of, maybe a little less deep on some of the others, depending on the company and what you're doing. But
I have a good definition.
What's that? Sorry?
I have a good definition.
Okay, define me.
So multi-channel marketing refers to the practice of let me start again. Multi-channel marketing refers to the practice of interacting with customers using a combination of indirect and direct channels. So there's a bunch of examples. You're giving them already. Websites, retail stores, mail order catalogs, direct mail, email, mobile, press releases. So lots of things. But I like this notion of, to your point, direct and indirect. Because I think going deep on one channel or a couple channels, you forget about these indirect ways, which often are the ones that I think capture people. And to almost tie this back to marketing, for me, and I'm actually curious about what you think about this, because I don't think you've ever heard me say this to a client before. For me, when I think about paid search on Google versus Facebook, I really think about Google as that direct marketing, because you're getting me searching for something active that I'm looking for. I need my house windows cleaned. Clean my windows. I'm Googling it. It's very direct that, I'm asking for something, your ad's popping up, or maybe your great SEO is popping up, or maybe your latest news stories. I'm searching for that. Whereas social media, obviously you know the types of things I like, my habits. Okay, it's spring. She's a mom. She's probably thinking about these things. So I haven't asked Facebook to show me window cleaning, but I might get a Men in Kilts ad on Facebook just based on my demographics, based on what they know about their persona. But that's more indirect. But I may see those indirect ads over and over again, and then I might go and Google it.
Right.
And all of a sudden it's a direct channel. So that's how I kind of, at least when it comes to paid search advertising, that's how I explain the differences between the two. I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I guess similarly, but I call Google a pure lead generation channel. So you're generating leads because you're putting an ad in front of somebody that's searching they know what they want, and you're basically saying, we deliver, this is what we do. Whereas I consider really public relation, press releases, Facebook advertising, organic social media, really, and all of those things are really to kind of a more of a form of PR over sort of direct, even though Facebook is sort of a bit more of a direct marketing channel. I consider those more demand generation. So what you're doing is you're creating awareness, you're creating education, you're putting something in front of somebody that they didn't know they wanted or needed, or didn't necessarily even know about. So you're sort of educating them, and then you're creating demand for your products, because now all of a sudden people see what you do, or you have a solution that they weren't aware of, and you're creating that demand. And then to your point, the purpose of the whole multi-channel piece is that they probably, I saw that on Facebook, I'm going to go Google it now, right? That's a perfect example. And what are they going to find on Google? They might find your ad, but if you're doing PR, they might find your press release, which is more informative potentially than your ad, or they might find, right? Like they might find your video, which
For
is an
your SEO.
educational video, or if you're doing SEO, they'll find your organic post or whatever, right? So yeah, it all really kind of fits together. And I mean, PR, obviously PR is all about sort of, at least at its core, I guess, media relations is a big part of PR. And the purpose there is getting it in front of as many eyes as possible. But really in today's PR, you talk about multi-channel in public relations specifically, and we talk about this a lot internally now. It's like, hey, we can put something over the wire and we can pitch like news media, traditional media, but there also might be bloggers. There also might be a podcast you can get your client on, or you can get your brand in front of, right? There might be a vlogger, there might be, right? So multi-channel in PR actually is a little bit more nuanced even than sort of the broader multi-channel of marketing communications, in that, in today's environment, there are just many different ways to get your story told from a media perspective that isn't sort of that traditional media, or it might be an ad buy, an advertorial that looks like an article, but it doesn't look like an advertisement. It looks like an educational article, but it is a paid piece, right? So, multi-channel in PR is really becoming the way to go. Really, again, we've been working on this a lot internally at CIPR and wrapping our heads around how we approach this for clients.
Let's see. It's interesting to me too. I'm going to throw another definition, but like this concept of marketing communications. I think when we were first having a conversation about this as a team, I kind of like laughed it off, because basically it's just marketing and communications, right? So it's like the definition I have here, I love in brackets, and just Googling this obviously, but in brackets is Marcom, right?
Marcom.
So I feel like it's like some Gen Z out there is hipping it up. Right. So marketing communications is a fundamental and complex part of a company's marketing efforts. Marketing communication includes advertising, direct marketing, branding, packaging, your online presence, printed materials, public relations, sales presentations, sponsorship, trade show appearances, and more. I mean, what's funny to me about that is like you've just described public relations and digital marketing and like traditional marketing.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's this evolved way of talking about it. And I think like if I'm almost speaking to like fellow consultants in this, but it's like if you're separating these two things and people are confused, potentially their like company is just calling it Marcom now. Yeah. And it's everything. Like it's, you think about some of the bigger companies you and I have worked for, and it's like,
we do all those things.
That's your communications department. Like when I was at CAP, we had a manager of media, we had a manager of brand, we had a manager of campaigns, we had a manager of whatever. And like all of those people had their advisors underneath, but they were dealing with a specific example of what we just gave, right? Someone's dealing with press releases, someone's dealing with sales presentation and brand and that piece. Someone else, like it's just
and I would argue that what's really happened in the last few years, and again, I'm a broken record on this. These worlds are coming together, and they're no longer separated. But really, what happened fundamentally at its core is the media landscape changed, and now you're paying for stuff you never paid for before. And now there's different channels for paying for getting eyeballs onto your brand, product, whatever it is, in a way that looks like it's not an advertisement, right? And that's to me the fundamental directional change that's happening in the marketing and communications world. Is like people don't want to see 10% off, 5% off. I mean, yeah, if you're in a retail store, sure, whatever, that's sort of standard retail kind of stuff. But that, and I'm a broken record on this too, but like the world is changing to this in the sense that like all the power is going into the consumer's hands. Yeah. And now when a customer comes to talk to a salesperson, they've done 80, there's lots of studies that show 70%. I would say 80% of the research has been done online. And now they're talking to a salesperson just to work out some fine details and determine some differences likely between 1, 2, or 3 companies. And so your job as a brand, as a company, is to fully educate your consumers as well as possible using these various different channels, so that they obviously come to the conclusion that your solution is the best one, right?
Well, you get our dog a treat. I'm going to talk about my experience at CAP, so Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. And I mean, what was interesting in my role there is it continually evolved, right? So it was this started as social media. I reported to a media manager, which again I think is very interesting and nuanced. So you have the social media that feels it was very organic. I did no paid social media as a part of my role, but it was lumped under media relations. So you think about public relations as a multi-channel marketing approach, and social media reporting to that, I think is very interesting. The other person who reported to the media manager at the time was the website guy. Um, and he is a guy. I don't just say the website guy to because girls can't, but he was a guy. We both reported into media. And I feel like we very much treated our roles as owned media. And Travis, who was the media manager, he was responsible for earned media, obviously, and that was a key part of his role. But the owned media channels helped him do his job better.
Mm-hmm.
And then, fast forward a few years, obviously at that time we had a marketing manager who was also doing their thing. And then you had, like you said, this big shift in public relations, um, media relations, and all of a sudden the people that our department were pitching all the time also now were presenting these paid opportunities. And so again, you start measuring that internally. My role changed now to something called campaigns manager, which I think was this true hybrid of marketing communication. So I was
Mm-hmm.
dealing
Mm-hmm.
with a paid um, engagement with post media that was over $1 million buy over 12 months, but it was about sponsored pieces in traditional newspapers. It was about digital ad placement on post media properties across, and every province seeing something different because obviously in an industry like oil and gas, the west coast and the east coast, they have different issues. Everybody in the middle has different issues. So
Mm-hmm.
curating the owned media that we had to fit this paid media engagement and then complementing it with the earned media piece. So there was this, started with a very focused earned media, owned media marketing. Never the two shall really meet. And then, within a 5-year mark, now you have another kind of manager at that table, and you almost have your earned, owned, paid as three different departments
Mm-hmm.
or I guess pillars of a department that we ended up working so collaboratively, the three of us, on everything,
Yeah.
because you had to, because this message, and owned had to resonate with earned, and they were good at it. But now all of a sudden you have this paid component, and it was super interesting to watch the evolution of that within the team and
Yeah.
how like even just something as simple as a content calendar really changed. But the impact from we did tons of polling and research um, as a team, and you watched the poll results, especially in different regions where you had all three things tuned up, talking about the same message, pushing it forward. And it was this real kind of marketing communications or multi-channel marketing approach that was able to move a dial that I don't think we were succeeding in moving the dial a few years before
Yeah.
by having very siloed approaches to those things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. This whole conversation is making me think about our business and how we need to be structured. So I know it drives Christina crazy because I'm the visionary in the company. So I'm always dreaming up new ways to do what we do better. But I really like this concept of marketing communications, owned, paid, and earned. Actually, I mean, we're kind of set up that way already. We just don't use that language, but
Interesting, like again, just watching how the marketing and communication industry evolves and what it calls itself. And,
mm-hmm.
if you peek into the structures of certain companies, I think about one, I don't want to like name names, but like I think about one, again, my old oil and gas days company that has no marketing department, doesn't have a communications department, but has a public relations department.
Mm-hmm.
And so like to me, that's like old school, right?
Yeah.
Like not that those public relations managers and specialists on that team are doing things the old school way, but like that company is thinking about marketing communications in a very kind of old
Yeah, but I would
way.
argue it's
Like,
it's it's funny that you say that though. When we talked to Mario Tanaguzzi, he was sort of saying that, like now, the PR departments are basically within companies. You know what I mean? So it's like every company's sort of becoming a PR machine of its own type of thing, right? So I mean, so it's sort of like old, but like maybe it's actually going to be the new, who knows, right? So
well,
it's
but there's
interesting.
just no marketing and communications there, right? So they're
Yeah,
only pursuing, even if it's in house and not through an agency, they're pursuing one channel,
yeah,
right? So they're just this multi channel marketing approach. They're just pursuing one, and that's
yeah,
earned media. And yeah, they got a website and they have all these things. So maybe a bit of owned in that, but they
yeah.
certainly don't have this multi channel approach where you look at some of the more, I guess, and again, I don't want to use the word modern because obviously all of these businesses are, take this with a grain of salt in Canada, thriving. Um, but like you look at the teams where it's like a huge marketing team, a huge comms team, everyone's broken down in this kind of multi channeled approach. And they are probably brand names that you know right
Hmm.
away because
Hmm.
they've been so prevalent in a multi channel approach, whether it's
Right.
direct or indirect.
Yeah, totally. Yes, we should wrap it up.
Peter has some visioning to do on our company.
Always.
So I guess, I mean, at the end of the day, to wrap up, multi-channel marketing is important. So never think about your public relations as this siloed effort, because I think, good segue to the next episode, but you're setting yourself up for some um, false expectations, I guess. If
Yeah.
all you're doing is sending a press release or sending a letter, it's really this multi-channel approach that is going to be the most beneficial to a PR program.
Yeah. And I'll wrap it up by saying within PR now, there's multi channels available as well. So you need to be thinking, even within just PR, the multi channel approach.
Totally. All right. Well, follow us on iTunes, Spreaker, Spotify, and tune in into the next episode in a couple days.
Toodaloo.